Welcome back to the Lines College Football Podcast. I'm Brett Gibbons with TheLines.com, and as always, I'm joined by Kelley Ford. Kelley, we've got a jam-packed slate here Saturday. How are you feeling about it upcoming?
I'm feeling great, Brett. Anytime I'm talking to you, talking college football, it's a good time. The Week 8 Saturday slate is big time. There are a couple games on here that I'm really excited about. I mean, I'm talking top 1, top 2 games of the entire regular season potentially. So, yeah, man, it's always fun, but this week it's extra special. We got some huge college football games on Saturday.
Yeah, we sure do. Before we get into them, though, don't forget to follow the Lines US on Twitter. I am at Road to CFB, and Kelley's work can be found at K Ford Ratings. We'll be here every single week breaking down the remaining college football slate as well as individual weeknight games. If you're looking for our weeknight previews, go check out the YouTube. They are up there. We've got a really interesting slate on tap. Maybe not as marquee as it was last week. We may not have 5, 6, 7 blockbuster matchups, but boy, the big matchups we got this week are big. Pun intended for one of them at least. And huge, massive conference implications as well. Let's just dive right into it. Number 7, Penn State. At number 3, Ohio State. The Buckeyes are 4.5-point home favorites, and this game carries an over-under of 46.5. Had to double-check that one. Well, when's the last time we saw an Ohio State game with a 46.5-point total here? Kicks off at noon on Fox, which is a travesty, but hey, that's what we've been dealing with the past few years. Weather stuff, potential rain and breezy winds, we're talking 10 to 15 miles an hour, are expected here in Columbus, at least up here in Cleveland. It's going to be a washout, so maybe that'll get down there as well. Just keep an eye on the weather. Maybe that's why the under has taken a hit. Tuesday night into Wednesday, it dropped from 48 down to 46.5. Health stuff, I need updates on Trevion Henderson, Emeka Egbuka, and Mayan Williams. All three missed last week, and I think it matters a whole lot more this week if they don't play than when Ohio State was taking on Purdue. I'm actually most concerned, I think, about Egbuka. I know Trevion Henderson may be the knee-jerk reaction to say, hey, if he comes back, that's the X factor. I think it's Emeka Egbuka because if the backs can't go, Ohio State can at least use Dallin Hayden. That may burn his redshirt opportunity, but he's very explosive, although the team does want him for the future. Right off the bat, my biggest concern with Ohio State, Penn State's pass rush versus Ohio State's tackles. Josh Gibbons still not up to snuff. He's going to have to go against names like Chop Robinson, Abdul Carter, some of the better pass rushers in the entire Big Ten. Kyle McCord is coming off his best game of the year, which is great. Not just statistically, but he looked better. I can understand that they're playing Purdue's defense. I can separate that and just look at what McCord is doing well this week versus last week's. I think this was his best game by far. He's a lot better with time to throw. Will he have time to throw? I don't know. Depends how aggressive Manny Diaz decides to be on Saturday. The offense starts clicking when they target Marvin Harrison Jr. Of course, I don't have to tell you that. He's the best player on the field. But he may see a fair share of Kalen King, who's a preseason All-American corner for Penn State. On the other side, we all saw that presser with James Franklin when he was asked about not throwing the ball downfield, but there is a little bit of truth to it. Drew Aller's ADOT is the lowest in the Big Ten. It's honestly kind of inexcusable. A lot of quick game. They're getting the ball out of his hands, making it easy for him. I do like that for a first-time starter, but I don't get it with the 5-star. Risk adverse with one of the most talented quarterback prospects Penn State's ever had? I don't know. Not my style. But who am I to criticize here? Penn State's going to line up and try to run the football with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. The Buckeyes are 13th, though, in rushing success rate allowed on the season. But if you watch the Notre Dame game, that front did get pushed around a little bit by Notre Dame's offensive line, and I think Penn State's offensive line is just as good as Notre Dame's. The secondary has improved a lot for Ohio State. Last year was a liability. This year it's a strength. I don't know if you saw The Athletic put out a report about an anonymous coach saying the secondary sucks and that's the issue. They must be looking at last year's tape because that is not the case this year by any stretch of the imagination. But Penn State does get the other Kent State corner, Cephas, the receiver. He is the X factor for Penn State.
Yeah, Brett, this game, I've got a lot to say. I'm going to start with the watchability score here. It's a 9.9 out of 10. Woo. This is the number 1 game of the week for me. It is the number 2 game of the entire regular season behind only Ohio State at Michigan. As a college football fan who considers the regular season to be sacred, I could not be more excited for this game. But Brett, as an Ohio State fan, I couldn't be more nervous for this game at the exact same time, man. Before we dive into the predictive outlook, just a quick look at these resumes because they're both really, really good. Ohio State's number 4 in the most deserving rankings. There's only a 17% chance that the average top 25 FBS team would be undefeated against the Buckeyes schedule. And Ohio State's outscoring their opponents by 13 points per game more than would be expected of the average top 25 FBS team. On the other side, Penn State's number 10 in the most deserving rankings. I know Nittany Lion fans they're a little hot about that. They think they should be ranked a little bit higher. Let me get to that in 1 second. Nittany Lions number 11 in record achievement. They're number 2 in relative scoring margin. They're outscoring their opponents by 16.2 points per game more than would be expected of the average top 25 FBS team against the Nittany Lions schedule. That's a mark exceeded only by Oklahoma's 18.2 points per game more. I said Nittany Lion fans are mad at me. Hey, get in line, Nittany Lion fans. Here's the good news. No team has a bigger chance to improve its resume with a win this week than Penn State. There's only an 18% chance that the average top 25 team would be expected to win in Columbus this weekend, making it the number 1 biggest resume boost opportunity of the week for Penn State.
And Kelly, I want to jump in really quick because I've seen a lot of, well, what does that mean? What's expected? How do you know that? If you doubt the numbers that Kelly is giving to you right now, all you have to do is go look at the ATS records and see how much they're outscoring those opponents by the spread. Oklahoma's number 1 in the country, exceeding spread expectations each and every week. I just wanted to give a little bit more of a concrete, an alley-oop to you there because I've seen a lot of people kind of questioning like, well, where are these numbers coming from? Data, guys, that's where it's coming from.
For those that have questions about the numbers and their validity, feel free to shoot me a note. I can explain to you kind of what it's backed in, why we like it, and its track record. Summary, the model's performing very, very well this year. I have a lot of faith in what the data is showing. No model's perfect, including mine, and no model tells the full story, including mine. It takes more than just a model, but the model gives us a really good starting point, and so that's how I like to kind of anchor my analysis. You all as fans can build from there. Speaking of the model, we'll talk about the predictive stuff now because all the resumes are great and that's fun to talk about. And I actually enjoy that probably more as a talking point. But if we're talking about picking this game and trying to break it down, none of that matters because all that matters is the predictive aspect. My numbers make it Ohio State -4.5. Sounds familiar. Didn't you say that was what the Vegas line was? Okay, anyway,
that's
my numbers make it Ohio State -4.5. It's a 62% win expectancy for the Buckeyes. For the 5th straight week, Ohio State is number 1 in my power ratings. The defense is a season best number 4 now, while the offense is currently number 9. Brett, Kyle McCord in that offense, they need to be ready. This is the best opposing defense that the Buckeyes will face all season based on my current numbers. And for Penn State, with a K Ford rating of 24.9, this is the highest I've had the Nittany Lions power rated all season. They're currently number 4 overall with a season best number 2 defense and the number 21 offense in the country by my numbers. The defenses should have the advantage on both sides of the ball in this one, as I just outlined. But the difference for me is the number 21 Penn State offense. That's the only unit in this game ranked outside the top 10 nationally. Plus, this game is in Columbus. This game has absolutely massive Big Ten East and college football playoff implications. Currently, Ohio State has a 37% chance to make it to the Big Ten Championship and a 36% chance to make it to the CFP, all of this by my numbers. With a win, those numbers jump to a 53% and 58% respectively. A loss, though, Ohio State's chances fall to just 11% to make it to Indy and 3% to make the CFP. Absolutely huge swing for the Buckeyes. No different for Penn State. Currently, Nittany Lions have a 30% chance to make it the Big Ten Championship game, 26% chance to make the CFP. A win bumps those up to 56% and 62%. Both of those ceilings are higher than Ohio State. So if a Penn State wins, their chances to make both of those games, both of those events, greater than Ohio State's with a win. With a loss, Penn State's chances fall to 14% to win the East and 5% to make the CFP. Just massive leverage on both of those fronts, as expected, when you've had these two teams on a collision course since the beginning of the year. Bottom line, I have Ohio State -4.5, 38% chance Penn State earns their first win against the Buckeyes since 2016 and their first win in Columbus since 2011.
I know it's popular right now to say both of these offenses stink, but that's just not the case. I know you said they're number 9, number 21. To me, there's really no reason Penn State should be number 21. They have the talent to be a top 10 offense in the country. They just don't use it right. I don't know. Is that going to change this week? If there's a week for it to change, yeah, it should be this one. And in my opinion, if you're going to back Penn State, just take them to win outright. Otherwise, this feels like an Ohio State cover at home. I couldn't wrap this up without mentioning James Franklin's track record, because that's really what my entire handicap of this game kind of is predicated on. He's 1-8 against Ohio State. Come on, we see it each and every year. He covers the spreads because he's aware of them against Northwestern and Indiana's and those teams. But when it comes to the big games against Ohio State and Michigan, just like, he's not getting it done.
Yeah, no doubt, Brett. I mean, I was going to let it go, but then when you said, I can't get out of here without mentioning James Franklin's track record, and that's fair. I'm totally with you. I just told you what my numbers say, and my numbers are back in Ohio State -4.5. So I'm not expecting an Ohio State win, or excuse me, a Penn State win. 38% chance for Penn State. That's what the model says. I just want folks to remember, myself included, there was a time not too long ago when that was the narrative with Jim Harbaugh too, is, hey, he's winning all the other games, but he's not beating Ohio State, and it was Michigan State, ironically, that he could not beat. Now he can't lose to those teams, as it turns out. And so we'll see. At some point, the odds, the law of averages say James Franklin's going to flip this narrative around. Maybe he never does. There are certain coaches. I mean, I think back to the Ohio State, Michigan, for example. Cooper, he beat everybody and he couldn't beat Michigan. He never did, and that's just the way it went. So there are coaches who never figure it out, but I feel like more times than not, we have this narrative, oh, he can't win this one, he can't win that one. Eventually that turns, and in the case of Harbaugh, it turned hard, and it hasn't turned back yet. So just keep that in mind, too, as we're thinking about Franklin and his track record, because I don't dispute what it's been, but it can change, and it can change like that. Because they've had some close calls against the Buckeyes, as you know.
Yeah, it certainly can. But is in Columbus with a still top 3 or 4 Ohio State team the year that they do it? Yeah, maybe. I'm certainly not counting it out. And, I really do think I lean Ohio State with the points. I'm going to wait and see what kind of Penn State money comes in later in the week, because late week money tells a story about where the market's at. And because we're at 4.5 right now, I know open 5.5. Those are dead numbers. That movement is peanuts when you're talking about significance in the market.
I know we joked, Brett, about we needed a separate hour-long breakdown of this game. We almost got there, actually, but I feel really good about it, man. This game is so exciting. I can't get over my excitement, even for a neutral college football fan. It's how I felt about Washington, Oregon last week. Those aren't my teams. If they win or lose, turned out to be a great game. I hope this one turns out to be the same.
I'm with you. Let's do a hard pivot from one Big Ten East blockbuster to another. We have Rutgers, a 5-point road favorite at Indiana. This game carries an over-under of 40 points. Kelly, I wanted to talk about Rutgers this week because I don't know how many chances we're going to get to talk about the Scarlet Knights, and I try to change things up week to week, talk about different teams, different conferences as we go, so that we don't get stuck in a rut here. But this one kicks off at noon Eastern on the Big Ten Network. The under got hit here too, just like the other one, down from 42 to 39.5 even in some spots, and potentially falling. We need to have a conversation, too, about the 5-2 Rutgers Scarlet Knights, baby. That's what I'm talking about. They're ranked 7th currently in the Big Ten in my ratings. They haven't been that high in a conference since the Big East, so I'm happy to talk about these guys. They did get out a lucky, I think, win is probably the best descriptor for that against Michigan State last week. The Spartans just absolutely collapsed in spectacular fashion in Piscataway. Actually, all 5 of Rutgers' wins this year have come in the vaunted SHI Stadium. Indiana, I do have to note, did part ways with their offensive coordinator a few weeks ago. This isn't brand new news, but I'm not entirely sure that their offensive struggles were a scheme issue. They were at least trying to do something different. They know they didn't have the talent to line up the ball and beat their opponents, especially Ohio State. So they come out and run some sort of option. And to be honest, yeah, they didn't score points, but it did give the Buckeyes defense a little bit of fits at the beginning there as they tried to figure out what was unfolding in front of them. But they dished their offensive coordinator. I don't know if he was a scapegoat or whatever's going on. I think Tom Allen's time in Bloomington is probably close to over. And like I said, they mucked things up. That's how they do it. They drag you down to their game and make you play a slow, ugly game. They did that with Ohio State and Louisville. But then they had that 4 overtime scare against Akron, and then they've lost their last 2 games, a combined score of 96-24. Not entirely sure what happened to the defense that held Ohio State and Louisville to 22 points per game. That's maybe they just ran out of juice. I really don't know. Maybe the tape's out. It's kind of inexplicable. But the biggest mismatch I see in this game is Rutgers' run game versus Indiana's run defense. The Hoosiers are 119th in EPA per rush on the season and 123rd in rushing success rate. On the other side, quarterback Gavin Wimsatt, he took 3 sacks last week, which actually doubled his season total in one game. He's been pretty good at avoiding sacks, and the offensive line's been keeping him pretty upright, pretty clean. I saw a stat this week on Twitter. I completely lost who shared it, and I apologize. I do want to give credit where credit is due. But they showed a correlation of pressure to sack ratios above 20% and being really, really bad in the NFL. Names like Brett Huntley, Jordan Love, Zach Wilson are those that were taking greater than 20% pressure to sack ratios in college. Anyway, not that Wimsatt's like an NFL prospect, but his is under 13%, which is a solid number and fourth best among Big Ten starters.
Brett, this game has a watchability score of 5.8. But believe it or not, it's actually the number 5 game of the early window.
So
early
it makes
window,
it on your TVs.
It will for at least the first half. It will. The windows. This is 2 weeks in a row. The windows have been hugely slanted towards later in the day. So just interesting how that works out. But at 5-2, you mentioned it. Rutgers 1.8 more wins than my preseason realistic expectations projected through 7 weeks. That's number 9 nationally on my overachievers list. They're having a really good year in Piscataway. I have Rutgers minus 7.5, which is a 71% win expectancy. Rutgers' power rating is 7 points better now than it was in the preseason. That full touchdown improvement ranks number 8 nationally in terms of who has been upgraded the most during the year by the model. No team has moved up more spots in the power rating rankings than Rutgers, who at number 47 now currently are 34 spots higher than they were in the preseason.
Wow.
So just a ton of improvement for Rutgers. Yeah, it's fun. I post those graphics every Monday now, or Sunday now, in terms of who's moved the most in a week, in the year. And instead of just the top 10, Brett, I've now moved into the full 133 view. A little bit easier, I think, for people to see where their team is, obviously. And it helps me just from a quick reference glance to see how good, because within the top 10, you're like, okay, that's good, but how good? Compared to the whole 133, you can see just how great this improvement's been for teams in the top 10, like Rutgers, in these different areas. So all that stuff's on the website. I reference it all the time during prep for this. I hope fans like it. Does take a little bit of time to put together, but I enjoy doing it. For the offense, Rutgers, it's just number 76, but it's this defense that's been incredibly impressive this season. They're currently number 30 ranked defensive unit by my numbers. For Indiana, Brett, you mentioned it. It's been a tough season. The Hoosiers are 2-4. Their only wins have come against FCS, Indiana State, and in overtime against Akron, who's one of the worst teams in the MAC. Indiana's current power rating is negative 6.7, the corresponding ranking of number 94. Both of those are season lows for the Hoosiers. The defense is number 90. The offense continues to be ranked sub 100. They're currently number 104. Even though this game is in Bloomington, Rutgers should have a big advantage on both sides of the ball in this one. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, they're the class of the division. Because of that, there's no conference championship game leverage in this one. I have Rutgers minus 7.5, 29% chance that Indiana beats Rutgers at home for the first time since 2019.
The other thing that's like actually exciting about this game, which, you know, how often do we get to say that about this, is Rutgers wins this game, and they're bowl eligible going into their bye week. And it's a good thing that they have this game, because then they have Ohio State, Iowa, Penn State, and Maryland after that.
Yes, yeah. So, Brett, they're currently sitting on 5 wins, as we mentioned. My projections for regular season win total is 6.5. So they're basically saying, all right, you're going to get this one, and that might be it. But, hey, you mentioned the bowl game. Preseason, and this is on the graphics, too, and I put them there so that we could have these kind of conversations later in the year. What were the preseason expectations for this team? Preseason, by my numbers, maybe Rutgers fans had it more, maybe Rutgers haters had it less. My numbers said 15% chance that Rutgers makes a bowl game. That is now up to an 89% chance. And again, you win this game, it's taken care of. And I would encourage Rutgers to do that because, as you mentioned, that upcoming schedule, my numbers, Iowa, they're projected as a touchdown underdog. Maryland, 3.5 points. The Ohio State and Penn State, don't look, Rutgers fans, it's not pretty.
And I know people probably come to you and say, Kelly, your projections were wrong. Here we have Rutgers securing a bowl game. No, Rutgers just operating the 15% of their projected preseason. Think of probabilities, guys. I'm just getting ahead of it. Even with an awful total of 40 points, I probably still lean under. It's not going to be a fun bet to make, but it's probably the only play that I have on this game here. Rutgers defense, like you mentioned, pretty dang good. They're 7th in EPA per pass nationally and 15th in overall EPA per play. And Indiana just declines field and offense. They fire their offense coordinator, and they just really don't have it. I don't see it. So, yeah, probably under 40 points if I'm making a play on this game. We have a fascinating game, I think, in the Big 12 here. Oklahoma State on the road at West Virginia. The Mountaineers are 3.5-point home favorites, and this game carries an over-under of 50 points. Kicks off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN's main channel, so we get a good close-up look to this one on the national programming. This line opened at West Virginia minus 3.5. It dipped to -3, and then it was bought back up. That kind of seems to be the fulcrum point for this game so far. Later week movement's going to be a little bit more evident on where the market lies, so just keep an eye out. If it moves through that 3, then there's a very strong market backing of Oklahoma State rather than if it moves beyond 3.5 in favor of West Virginia. They're also forecasting some rain, maybe a little bit breezy, 10 to 12 miles an hour. That doesn't affect totals very much, but the gusts could when you're talking about 15, 20 miles an hour. Look, this is a bowl game, an unofficial bowl game I'm putting in quotes, between teams I personally wrote off at the beginning of the season, and they turned out to be just fine, if not kind of good. I was scouring the internet, turning this thing upside down to find out how Oklahoma State managed to turn things around recently. Mike Gundy, the head coach, attributes it to the offensive line finally being healthy and guys playing back in their correct position and what they were supposed to do all offseason. At the beginning of the year, they had a bunch of injuries and guys playing out of position, and it really cost them. But one thing to note, offensive lineman Dalton Cooper, a transfer from Texas State, he is still questionable for this upcoming game. That would be a pretty big loss if he doesn't play. Since the bye week, the Pokes have beaten Kansas State and Kansas, and they've averaged 34 points per game. That is not what they had going on at the beginning of the year. The other component to this, I think, is they've gotten running back Ollie Gordon more involved. He had 19 total carries in the first 3 games, and now he's averaging almost 23 per game. He's rushed for 121, 136, and $168 in the last 3 games. So he's getting it going on the ground, and the Pokes are better off for it. West Virginia, on the other hand, their defense is pretty good at bottling up run games, at least against teams that line up in a way that they want to run it. They do allow more yards to teams that spread things out, scatter the box, force you to have outside run fits like Houston and Texas Tech. They were able to get some stuff going on the ground, not anything crazy. When assessing the Mountaineers' defense, though, I do ask people to take out that fourth quarter against Houston. I know it's hard to pick and choose and say, well, we can't count that. It counts, but it's a complete outlier of just one single quarter. Outside of that, they're allowing 15.3 points per game in their last 4. So it's like you can look at that and say, well, it's skewed because they allowed 22 points, 7 of which being on a Hail Mary, or 6 of which being on a Hail Mary. I'm kind of taking that out when I'm assessing them as a whole.
Yeah, Brett, I don't disagree with you. This game has a watchability score of 7.2. For weeks, I've had West Virginia as one of my most underranked teams by the AP poll compared to my most deserving rankings. Been writing about that now for thelines.com each week. How does the AP stack up against my most deserving? Who's overranked? Who's underranked? West Virginia was consistently showing up in the top 3 of these teams are underranked. The Mountaineers rose to as high as number 14 last week in the most deserving before that soul-crushing loss at Houston, as you mentioned. But still, at 4-2, West Virginia has 1.5 more wins than my preseason realistic expectations projected through 7 weeks. That's number 16 nationally. I have West Virginia minus 5.5 in this one. It's a 65% win expectancy for the 3rd straight week. West Virginia is number 41 in my power ratings. It's a good... Now, granted, one of those weeks was an off week, so they didn't play to add anything or change a ton, but your power rating and your power rating rank can move in an off week. We know that, but it just goes to show that from a predictive analytics standpoint, we don't care if you won or lost or didn't play. It's how was the relative performance to the expectation. That's what we care about here. Win or lose, how did you perform relative to expectations? West Virginia is still number 41 on my power ratings. It is the highest they've been ranked all season, and they've been that for the last 3 weeks. This week, the defense is number 45. The offense is number 53. Things were looking bleak for Oklahoma State. You mentioned it, Brett. After a road loss to Iowa State in week 4, the Pokes clearly regrouped during their off week, and after back-to-back home wins against Kansas State and Kansas, as you mentioned, the Cowboys are up to number 52 in my power ratings. I actually had them number 43 coming into the year. Some people said, hey, that's too high, and maybe they dropped to as low as number 70, so for a minute I was thinking, yeah, you're right. Now this team's starting to look a little bit more like the team that I thought they were going to be coming into the year. Still not quite back to that level, but they have the potential. You win this one, you look good doing it. We'll see what happens. The defense is number 51. The offense is number 59. By my numbers, the defenses should be the stronger units on both sides here. The difference for me in this game, it's in West Virginia. It's in Morgantown, and the West Virginia offense is the only top 50 unit in this game for me. The winner of this game will have the 4th best chance to make the Big 12 championship game by my numbers. but it's still a long shot. Oklahoma's way out in front. Texas is sitting pretty in number 2, and Kansas State is comfortably in the 3rd position. But the winner here does move into number 4. Bottom line, I have West Virginia minus 5.5. It's a 35% chance that Oklahoma State gets revenge for last year's defeat in Stillwater.
One thing I do have to mention about West Virginia is that aside from Penn State in week 1, in which they lost 38-15 with some late scoring that mattered for many people, I benefited from it. It's fine. They haven't played a quarterback with a pulse all year. Is Alan Bowman a quarterback with a pulse? I don't know if I'm ready for that, to call him that. He's been fine. He's probably the best that they have played in recent weeks. What I'm really interested to know, especially at this juncture, we're at such an interesting juncture of the season where we have enough data points to start figuring these teams out, but at the same time, there's still enough early season noise or noise from injuries and stuff in which maybe we don't really know about it. Which teams have changed? I think Oklahoma State is truly a team that's much better than we thought.
And Brett, listen, for someone, and you're in the space too, and you got your aggregated power ratings, as someone who's doing the power ratings, I can make the case after 12 games, there's still stuff in there with noise, and you don't know exactly. Our sample size is so small in college football, and that's why you see, especially early in the year, some big swings in power ratings. I mean, you're talking 6, 7 points, like in one direction or the other, because with a sample size of 12, this isn't baseball, where, hey, things are going to work themselves out, the cream's going to rise to the top. That's why in baseball, though, you're seeing it right now in the playoffs. I'm not watching a ton because that's not my sport of choice, but I'm keeping up with who's advancing. The best teams for the regular season aren't advancing because their sample size now, you're playing a best of 5, you're playing a best of 7. When you're playing 162 games, law of averages, the teams that are performing at a high level, they're going to rise to the top. We're playing 12. I'd take a best of 7 in all of these games. Are you kidding me? The data would be unreal. Best of 12, or in a 12-game season, even late in the year, you're going to have teams that you're like, man, I'm just not sold. This is what it says. But it's possible that a team can fool the model all year because you only have 12 data points.
Yeah, and that's why I think that if you're astute or hopefully listening to us, we can help you out and getting ahead of those things. And I do think that Oklahoma State is one of those teams that I think really is actually improved, and I don't know what the market has caught up to. I don't know what the market's adjusted. To be honest, I'm probably going to play over the point total in this because these are two, like you said, good defenses. Your model has them, in the 60s in offense, but I don't know. I think Oklahoma State's currently playing better than that. In a week-to-week snapshot, playing better than that. So if I'm playing anything here, I think I'm going to take over the total. Okay, behind Ohio State, Penn State, this may, maybe I'll get some pushback on this, but this may be, I think, the game of at least the afternoon window. We have number 17, Tennessee, on the road at number 11, Alabama. The Crimson Tide are 8.5-point home favorites, and this game carries an over-under of just 49. Again, I talked about when's the last time you saw an Ohio State game with a 46-point total. Alabama point totals are back to 2012 Alabama point totals. This game kicks off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS, as it historically does, besides last year. The third Saturday in October. I know it's so deliberate and so to the point, but what a great name for a rivalry. Am I right? It's one of the best.
You're so right, Brett. I absolutely love this game. And again, I'm not a fan of either one of these teams. I just love it. Love it.
I'm a fan of college football. That's why I like this rivalry. And last year, ecstatic theater. I mean, the Vols broke that 15-game losing streak to the Tide. They carried the goalposts out and threw them in the Tennessee River. But, Kelly, they haven't won in Tuscaloosa since 2003. They have an average scoring margin of they're losing by an average of 20.6 points per game on the road at Alabama. The Vols took a point of movement on Wednesday from 9.5 to 8.5. That's not super major, but 9's not an insignificant number, so that is kind of worth note. We'll see how, again, I keep harping on it, how it moves later on in the week when we have higher limits. I do have to talk about some injury stuff. Alabama starting safety Malachi Moore, he's been kind of often, he keeps getting re-hurt this year. He's he's a dynamic player when he's on the field. Also, tight end CJ Dipper. Both of those guys are questionable to play. Definitely keep an eye on them. They do impact the game. Tennessee, on the other hand, they lost wide receiver Brew McCoy 2 weeks ago for the season. Ugly injury. If you unfortunately saw the video of that one, I'm very sorry. It was awful, but he's done for the season with a leg injury. The wide receivers for Tennessee, they've been seriously disappointing this year. Squirrel White was somebody I was looking to in the preseason, maybe even be a breakout star, and he still is their best pass catcher, but the bar just really isn't set that high, and losing Brew McCoy, in my opinion, is pretty brutal to this passing offense. Nobody had more than 4 receptions last week. I know it's Texas A&M, but really? You couldn't get a guy the ball more than 4 times? Milton went just 11 for 20 for 100 yards flat. And Tennessee still won that game. Yikes. The Vols, they find offensive success on the ground, but I don't think that's going to continue this week against Alabama. Their defense is just nasty, and they've one of the best and most ferocious pass rushes in the country. Dallas Turner expectedly has been a menace. He's playing an All-American level. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. But what is surprising is I think the secondary is actually the most vulnerable unit in Alabama's defense. But if Joe Milton doesn't have time to throw, which I'm sure that Saban and Steele are not going to let him happen. They're going to pin their ears back and come after him and force him to make accurate throws. Not his specialty. I don't know that secondary is as vulnerable as it would be against a team with a more dynamic receiving core and maybe a better offensive front, one that can stand up to Alabama's pass rush, if there is any. And Joe Milton melts when the pocket gets busy. He's completing just 28% of his passes, and his ADOT is 21.4. To me, that's inexcusable. To me, that's as soon as he feels pressure, he's like, oh, God, let me throw it 95 yards because that's what I can do. And it's not getting – those aren't high percentage throws. We need a better offensive system. I think Alex Galesh, you see what he's doing down at USF. They're scoring a ton of points. I think he took a good offensive system with them. I'd like to see some adjustments. And if this is the week to do it with a pass rush like this, shorten those throws up, make 1 or 2 reads, let Milton get the ball out of his hand a little bit comfortable. But, man, I just don't know if Tennessee's going to do that. And on the other side, Jalen Milroe, he's very good at completing passes down the field on passes of 20 or more yards. He has 9 touchdowns, no picks, 16 big-time throws per PFF, and 144.8 passer rating. When he's funneled to intermediate throws, 3 picks, only 51% completion. This is how I know he's not an NFL quarterback. He's just good at throwing the ball downfield to good pass catchers. They've kind of turned into – this isn't my thought. I'm definitely stealing this from Twitter. They've turned to an NBA offense where they're exclusively shooting 3-pointers, aka passes 20 yards down the field, or dunks, handoffs, and throws behind the line. That's kind of what they've turned into at Alabama.
It works in the NBA. Can it work? Yeah. Can it work for Alabama?
Efficiency, sure.
Brett, I don't even know if you did it on purpose or noticed. Tennessee losing Brew McCoy for just brutal. Did you do that on purpose?
Yep. No pun intended there. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to make fun of that injury.
No, but the way you said it, I was like, did he mean to do that? It was brutal, and the play on words with the name. Got it. Okay. Just had to ask because you rolled through it so smoothly. 2 things I love the most about college football, Brett: upsets and rivalry games. Hands down, those are the 2 things. This game always checks at least one of those boxes the 3rd Saturday in October. And last year, it checked the other box as well. I am so excited to see if we can get both boxes checked this year. This game has a watchability score of 9.5. It is the number 2 game of the week for me. It's a top 20 regular season game of the entire year. And that is not, that 9.5, it's not accounting for the revenge factor that Alabama has in this. It's not accounting for the fact that Tennessee hasn't won in T-Town since 2003. All those things are outside of what I'm quantifying with the 9.5. So it has the ability, the potential to be even higher than that. I have Alabama number 7 and Tennessee number 21 in my most deserving rankings. The Crimson Tide are number 7 in record achievement. They're number 13 in relative scoring margin, while the Volunteers are number 21 and number 18, respectively, in those metrics. Only 5 teams can improve their resume more with a win this week than Tennessee can with a win in Tuscaloosa, where the average top 25 team would have a win expectancy of just 30%. I mentioned Penn State has the biggest opportunity to improve their resume. Tennessee, 5th biggest of all teams here in Week 8. The model has Alabama minus 7.5. It's a 71% win expectancy for the Crimson Tide. That said, Alabama's current power rating of 21.3 and corresponding ranking of number 10 are both season lows. Brett, this is the first time the Crimson Tide have been number 10 or worse in my power rating since 2008. It's been 15 years. Nick Saban's 2nd year in Tuscaloosa that's the last time the power ratings had Alabama at number 10. As I've said multiple times, though, on this show and other places throughout this year, really with regard to Alabama and Georgia for the most part, the Tide don't need to be better than the previous versions of themselves. The Tide just need to be better than the teams on their 2023 schedule. And as things are projecting right now, the model still believes that they are. The Tide's offense is currently number 23, while the defense has been uber efficient. They're ranking now number 5 nationally. That's bad news for Tennessee. It's bad news for anyone, but it's bad news for Tennessee because this is the best opposing defense that the Vols will play all year based on my current numbers, and Tennessee is currently at a season low, number 22 on the offensive side of the ball. This is a top 5 unit for me on offense coming into the year. Haven't lived up to those expectations yet. That can always change, but they haven't lived up to it yet. It's still a good offense. It's just not a great offense like we've seen in recent years. But while the offense is at a season low for Tennessee, the defense is at a season high. They rank number 14 on that side of the ball. My numbers give the edge to both defenses, but the Alabama defense being the only unit in the top 10 here, plus this game is in Tuscaloosa, those to me could be the deciding factors in this game, in the eyes of the model at least. Alabama currently has a 70% chance to win the West and 11% chance to make the college football playoff. With a win, those numbers improve to 75% and 16% respectively. A loss makes it about a 50-50 proposition that Alabama even makes it to Atlanta, and it all but eliminates the Tide from CFP contention, as that would be their second loss of the year already. Tennessee, on the other hand, currently has a 14% chance to make the SEC championship game. A win improves that to a 23% chance. A loss drops it down to just a 9% chance to win the East. Bottom line, I have Alabama minus 7.5. It's a 29% chance that Tennessee earns their first win, as you mentioned, Brett, in T-Town since 2003.
Yeah, if there's a phase where I'm looking for advantages for Tennessee, I think a phase that they can find success in is their pass rush. It's not equally good, but it's very good. They hounded Max Johnson last week, and I know Texas A&M's offensive line isn't that good, but I'm not sure Alabama's passing attack is really all that dissimilar, especially if Milroe's just going to sit in the pocket longer and wait for those downfield routes to develop, because that's really where he finds his success. Tennessee did take some money. I don't know. I'd probably lean them with the points, but I'm not really all that confident in them to be able to score on Alabama here. I think the days of taking Alabama unders are close to being over, considering we've arrived at 49 here. The one play I did make here, I took under Joe Milton's passing yards. It was hung at 197.5 earlier in the week. If you can find that number, I'd absolutely take under. I don't think that if Milton's passing for 100 yards on Texas A&M, who doesn't have a very good secondary themselves, how in the hell is he going to find yards against Alabama with a much better pass rush? That's probably the only play that I feel really good about in this game. Moving forward, this one I think has maybe the most exciting conference championship game implications or preview, or however you want to dice it. Toledo, believe it or not, on the road, a 2-point favorite at Miami of Ohio. This game carries an over-under of 48.5 points. Kicks off at 4 p.m. Eastern on ESPNU. Huge matchup. This may be a preview of what we get in Detroit later on in the road. Hey, Kelly, these two teams haven't played since 2011. Last I checked, they're both in the MAC.
I had to double check that. I was like, are you kidding me? Yes, it is since 2011. I think, Brett, honestly, the biggest thing for me in this game, the thing that I'm most disappointed in, because I'm very excited about it, we'll get to that in a second, this is a classic MACtion game. I wish we could have had it scheduled on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night in November. I understand when the schedules are made, and I get all that. We can't know everything, but man, I really would have liked to see this game on a Tuesday or a Wednesday late night prime time on ESPN. But hey, they're getting the 4 o'clock slot on linear ESPNU, so they'll take that in the MAC, I know. But gosh, this just screams MACtion to me, right?
I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. I'm still going to have this game on because, again, massive championship game implication, maybe even a preview. So when we come back and talk about these two teams later, for the sake of my future on Miami, Ohio, we'll have a data point. It is going to be breezy. We're talking 12 to 15 mile an hour winds. That gets into the territory of maybe affecting the total. And you saw it. The under took a hit on Wednesday, down from 50. I think it is likely due to that wind. Toledo, power ranked the best team in the MAC all year, comfortably so most of the year. But, man, they've been bad at covering the spread. They're 2-5 against the spread. I do need to also note some strength to schedule discrepancies. Toledo, they've only played the 128th toughest schedule in the country so far. So going 2-5 against the spread against a schedule that easy, yeah, I don't know, man. But on the other side, complete swing the other way. Miami of Ohio strength of record, 28th according to ESPN's FPI right now, which is pretty legit. I think that win over Cincinnati probably boosts them quite a bit here. But if we're talking Miami of Ohio, I can't talk about it without talking about Chuck Martin. He continues to just Chuck Martin in these games. It's the best way of putting it. They're 130th in pace, 128th in plays run, 110th in pass rate, and 120th in go rate. That's what Chuck Martin does. He doesn't go for it on fourth down. He plays ultra conservatively. But hey, 6-1 right now. Who can argue with that? That said, is Toledo's offense the unit to be able to take advantage of an opposing offense that likes to run things slow and conservative? I don't know. They've only played 2 teams that are above 110th in net points per drive so far in this year. Their top offensive threat, Penny Boone, running back, he's leads the MAC in rushing as we speak today. On the other side, on their defense, Toledo has multiple NFL picks in their secondary. Quinyon Marshall, the top corner, probably the top player on that entire team, and a great battle ahead with Miami of Ohio receiver Gage Lardovan. He led the country in yards per route run through 2 weeks. Then he got hurt, and he came back last week. So far in 3 healthy games, he's been targeted 12, 12, and 10 times. So he is the go-to guy there. Very talented receiver. I'm extremely excited to see him line up against Toledo's secondary.
Brett, this game's got a watchability score of 5.8 out of 10. That's pretty darn good for 2 MAC teams based on how the model is formulated with, average quality and projected competitiveness. Both teams riding 6-game winning streaks after each opened the season with a loss to a Power 5 opponent on the road. You talked about the difference in schedule strength and strength of record by ESPN. I think you said ESPN's has Miami's strength of record at 28. I have their record achievement at 26. So, it's absolutely been impressive. The overall most deserving ranking for these teams, both 6-1, both playing in the MAC, both losses came to Power 5 teams. Like a lot of similarities on the surface, but yes, diving deeper. Now the win at Cincinnati is going to play a big role here for Miami. Toledo doesn't have a win like that, but yes, Miami number 32 in my most deserving. Toledo number 55. So that is a significant gap difference for 2 teams who on the surface would appear have somewhat similar resumes. They're really not all that similar. Miami's is much better than Toledo's. From a predictive standpoint, though, Toledo is the best team in the MAC by my numbers. They have been the best team for the entire year, but home field advantage kicks in on this one. I have Miami minus 1.5, actually. So I'm actually on the other side of 0 here from the Vegas spread, which is interesting. Doesn't happen often. The model's performance in these games historically the last 5 years has been pretty darn good. Not saying I feel hugely confident in this one, but it's what the model says. It's a 53% win expectancy for Miami. At 6-1, the Redhawks have 1.7 more wins than I expected at this point in the season. They're all the way up to number 32 in the most deserving rankings, as I mentioned. Their negative 2.4 power rating is the best it's been all season. So what's that saying is Miami is 2.4 games worse on a neutral field than the average top 25 team. But that is the best power rating that they've had all year. They're getting closer and closer to that FBS average mark of 0. That improvement driven largely by the defense, which now ranks a season best number 48 for me. The offense is number 92, which doesn't sound great, but it's much better than the number 122, which is what I projected this Miami offense to be coming into the season. Despite the winning streak for Toledo, they are currently power rated a season worst, number 69. So Miami is up to their season best. Toledo is down to their season worst. The offense is number 52 for Toledo. The defense is number 72.
Kelly, before we move on, I just wanted to quickly go back to what you said about their 2.4 points worse on average than the average FPS team. I'm just looking at my quick aggregated power ratings. Some of the teams in that general average range, 61 to 70, Mississippi State, Illinois, Purdue, Nebraska, BYU, Michigan State, Virginia Tech. We're talking about Miami of Ohio, less than a field goal power behind these teams. Give or take a point or two. Just an idea of where they're at, right? Not so bad for a MAC team.
No doubt. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I appreciate the emphasis there because, this Miami team, take them serious here, especially in MAC play. Like, this is a good team, and they're better than I expected. I had them number 95 coming into the year, which is still, I expected them to be, them in Ohio, the top 2 teams in the East, and it's still that. We're going to get the Battle of the Bricks actually next week. That'll be at Ohio. So we'll see what that game looks like. But, there's a good Miami team. So I completely agree with your aggregated power ratings, too. Both defenses should be the better units in this game by my numbers. And while Toledo does have the overall better roster, and that's how you get, the better power rating here, the difference to the model boils down to the home field. As I mentioned, this game takes place in Oxford. Both these teams are already the favorites in their respective divisions to make it to Detroit, but the winner will take a commanding lead. Toledo's chances to win the West rise to 74% with a win, and Miami's rise to a 73% chance to win the East if they win this one. Bottom line, I have Miami minus 1. It's a 47% chance that Toledo wins in Oxford. Forget this, Brett. You said they haven't played since 2011. This would be the first time Toledo wins in Oxford since 1992. Now, I haven't played a ton of games against them, but, I mean, that's the year I was born, for some context there. It's been a long time since Toledo's got a win in Oxford.
This may be too far in the weeds. Maybe it's not even actionable information, but Kelly, have you ever been to the Miami of Ohio campus?
Dude, I did grad school at Ohio. Yeah, we went
fair.
we went to Miami, Ohio for the game, and I was over there. I had going to high school in Indianapolis, private high school. My mom's been a teacher there for forever. We're not rich. My mom's just been a teacher there. That's why we went. My sisters and I. A lot of my classmates and people that go to my high school or went to my high school go to Miami. So yeah, I've been to Miami a handful of times. It's kind of like Harvard a little bit in terms of the setup. Not the academic prestige. Don't hear me wrong, people out there. But in terms of, the bricks and how the buildings look and how it's set up, like that's kind of how that campus looks to me as someone who's been to both.
Yeah, if you're coming from the Ohio side, so maybe not Indianapolis, but if you're coming down from Toledo, again, this is so far in the weeds, probably not even necessary. You get off the interstate and you think you're almost there. And then you look at your GPS and realize, no, I still have an hour and 42 minutes of Ohio back roads to get there. So I do count this home field advantage as a little bit more than the average MAC. Miami does show out. They have a good attendance record, especially this year when they're good. It's on a Saturday. If the weather cooperates, it'll probably be pretty packed. But just the chore of getting there is a lot more than if you get on a chartered flight from Columbus to Austin or Columbus to Ann Arbor. That's a direct thing. Now, this is tough. This is even though it's in the same state, on the same half of the state, this is going to be a several-hour bus ride for Toledo. I can tell you, they're not chartering in. So just keep that in mind. Maybe not even actionable. Probably nothing toward the point spread. Just interesting. I love college football travel stuff. I'm a huge nerd. So the winner of this game to me feels like an absolute shoo-in for the Bahamas Bowl. It's these two teams are just destined to play UAB or whoever makes it out of Conference USA or whoever. I don't even know who the affiliate is anymore with that one with conference realignment. But I'm not sure we'll ever get there. I really wish we would. If we do get to 3 points, I'm probably betting Miami at home. Otherwise, this is a hands-off game for me. Okay, our second to last game here for the FBS on the docket. We have Coastal Carolina, a 10.5-point favorite at Arkansas State. This game carries an over-under of 60.5 points, and it kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN+. So it's not exactly a marquee game, but there is a reason I want to bring up. I do think this is interesting. The market's been in favor of Coastal all week. They're up from -9. Arkansas State comes off of a bye week. Has a slight rest advantage, though. If you're just looking at week to week and not paying attention to dates, Coastal hasn't played since last Tuesday. So really, it's only a 3-day rest advantage for Arkansas State, but that's not nothing. I tried fading Tim Beck again against App State last week, and for the first time this year, that went poorly. I've been pretty happy fading Tim Beck, but Coastal Carolina went out and beat App State. Their offense actually looked really competent. They opened things up. They let Grayson McCall make plays. Crazy idea to have your superstar quarterback running around making plays. I'm not sure. I tried to find the answer to this. I just couldn't. I'm not sure if Tim Beck handed the play calling off to Trickett or if it was the other way around or if it was neither, but it looked new. It looked fresh. It looked interesting. It looked creative. In my head, I assume that means Tim Beck handed it off to somebody else because I don't trust Tim Beck as far as I can throw him. This is also a big-time whoops on Arkansas State. Hand up, my fault. New quarterback came in, played out of his mind for 3 games, and I really thought that this team was turning a corner, kind of like how we talked about Oklahoma State earlier in the show. It turns out that's not the case. They got shut out 37-0 by Troy, so maybe they still are kind of bottom barrel of the FBS here. They're ranked no better than 106th in EPA in any metric or 112th in any success rate metric. Offense, defense, rushing, passing, or otherwise. Kelly, what do your numbers say about Arkansas State and how hilariously wrong I was?
Well, not on that one, but just quick note. The final score of the Arkansas State-Troy game, I had to check because that's on my graphics. I was like, oh, shoot, did I make this wrong? It was 37-3. Arkansas State did get a field goal.
Okay. Oh,
late in the fourth. It was late in the fourth quarter. I more so checked. I was like, wait, is my graphic wrong? Because I have made mistakes before. I have pulled information wrong or had mistakes in the data. So they did get their field goal at the end of the game, Brett.
Okay, 37-0 is when I checked out and said, okay, the 16.5 cover's not happening.
No, not happening at that point in the game. The numbers say this one has a watchability score of 3.5. That's pretty low, to be honest with you. But it's still an interesting game to talk about for the couple of reasons that you talked about. At 1-2 in conference play, it's been a disappointing season for my preseason Sun Belt East favorites, Coastal Carolina. I still have the chance minus 13.5 in this one. It's an 83% win expectancy. The Coastal offense is number 54. That's by far the best unit in this game. Their defense is number 79. That makes them the second best unit in this game. So clearly Coastal has the advantage on both sides. It's usually like that when you've got a game that's got a spread of 2 touchdowns. For Arkansas State, this team was dead last in my most deserving rankings for the first month of the season, due largely to the fact they got beat 73-0 at Oklahoma. That's going to drag you down when that's one of 3 data points early in the year in the most deserving rankings. We don't overweight that for the power ratings, but in the early year most deserving, that's going to be that's going to be a big factor there. They also bottomed out as dead last in the power ratings for 1 week in September as well. Now the Red Wolves are number 125 in the power ratings. They have the number 103 defense, the number 125. Sorry, the 103 offense, number 125 defense. That is the worst opposing defense that Coastal will face this season based on my current numbers. This is not good for Arkansas State. They're not last anymore, but they're still in that bottom 10. It's not where you want to be. The Sun Belt East remains wide open, and the Chants need a win in this one to stay in the race. If they lose it, go ahead and forget about it. Bottom line, I have Coastal Carolina minus 13.5. It's a 17% chance that Arkansas State earns their first victory in this series since 2019.
It's a game I'm at least going to watch back with intrigue and intent, because I need to know if Jalen Rayner is actually turning this team around and they just ran into a very good defense in Troy, because Coastal Carolina, not great defensively, or if it was just like this 3-game blip that's just not going to happen anymore. But the way I see it is there's 2 momentum swings going in opposite directions for each of these teams. And so that's why I took Coastal Carolina with the points, and I still would. I'd really take them at any reasonable number. I have to reasonable in there, so you don't come at me and say, well, what about minus 20 foot? No, stop it. Just reasonable as far as it can move, really, under 14. Mostly because Arkansas State does look like they really are just that bad. I want to know, though, who's calling the plays for Coastal Carolina. That's going to determine how I view them for the rest of the year. Was that really a shift in philosophy? Was it really a handoff in offensive play calling? I can tell you that was not the same offensive game plan that they've had for a majority of this year, specifically that Georgia State game. I do need to know if this is going to be a permanent change moving forward, because if so, I'm going to change my stance on Coastal Carolina and get behind them more often before the market catches up.
And Brett, real quick on that, because you mentioned App State, Georgia State, it got me looking at the schedules here. Again, model likes Coastal comfortably. This could be kind of a sandwich game, though, for the Chants. They're coming off the win at App State. That's huge. And next week they welcome in Marshall. That's a much better power-rated team than Arkansas State. This could be a sandwich-type game. You're going on the road.
Sure.
It's just something to keep in mind. But Arkansas State is pretty darn bad by the power ratings. I don't expect it to be that. Just keep it in mind. If Coastal comes out and lays an egg, you said, what happened? Big win last week. Big game next week. We've seen it before. We'll see it again.
Yeah, I do believe they can charter into Jonesboro, but that's another one of those college towns that's like super far removed from any metro area. Been there too. Beautiful stadium, actually. They have waterfalls in their end zone. It's great.
That's cool.
Anyway, our last FBS game on our slate here, we have number 14 Utah on the road at USC. The Trojans are 7-point home favorites. This game carries an over-under of 56 points, and it kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox's primetime night window. USC was bet up from minus 6.5 on Wednesday. Not insignificant, moving on to a key figure. I'm keeping an eye out to see if Utah gets buyback or if it moves all the way through 7, or just maybe not at all. It's kind of looking like at this point, the writing's kind of on the wall. There's a lot of rumors out there. Cam Rising probably just not going to play it all this season. It was one of those things where maybe he's ready for week 1. We're optimistic he can play in week 1. Now he's looking at a medical red shirt, maybe not playing at all. Backup Brandon Rose, the one that suffered that really scary camp injury, he's also looking at a medical redshirt, which means it's probably the Bryson Barnes show. He was the guy last game, and appears to be in line to start again this week. Last week, surprise, can't say I accounted for Caleb Williams throwing 3 interceptions. It gave Notre Dame all sorts of short fields. Let's just put it out there. He's out of the Heisman race. I think he's firmly cemented himself out of that, playing against the big national TV game, playing that poorly. USC, remaining schedule 10th hardest in the country. And boy, is it a tough stretch, even situationally, including Notre Dame. At Notre Dame, then they host Utah. They go to Cal. The Golden Bears are off a bye. Watch out for my upsets article next week. It's definitely probably going to be in there. I've been talking about it since the preseason. And then they come home and face Washington. They go to Oregon, and then they play UCLA, their rival. And then interestingly, they get a bye week before conference championship week. So if they cement a spot by winning these games in the Pac-12 championship, that's going to be very interesting. I don't know how many teams in the past decade have had a bye week going into conference championship week. I'm not sure that we'll see a more diametrically opposed matchup all season long. Utah, 116th in offensive efficiency so far and 3rd in defensive efficiency. On the other side, USC, 9th in offensive efficiency and 105th in defensive efficiency. So this is a really interesting matchup that I honestly don't have a lot of firm beliefs in. Like, I don't really know what to expect. It's going to be interesting to sit back and watch. The biggest issue with me, though, is the Utah offense. They're one-dimensional. They're not explosive in the run or pass game. The offensive line hasn't been great. Can USC's defense make them explosive? Maybe.
Yeah, Brett, this is a game. It's got a watchability score of 8.9 out of 10. Makes it the number 4 game of the week for me. Again, like I talked about with Tennessee, Alabama, that doesn't factor in the ultimate revenge factor for a USC program that lost to this Utah squad not once but twice last year. But I have to say, this is a game, I'm still excited about it. Number 4 game of the week. It's going to be on. It won't be on the main screen. I think it's the number 2 game of the window that it's in. But it'll be, I'll have my eyes on it, that's for sure. This is a game, though, that, just to be honest, in the preseason, this was one I really had circled. Cam Rising hasn't played. Utah still only has 1 loss. People they're kind of writing them off because of this, and I'm not saying the numbers disagree. I'll get to that in a minute, but this team still only has 1 loss with a bunch of tough games coming up. USC, they only have 1 loss too. Now, granted, their toughest games are coming up, so nothing is lost yet for either of these teams. If you're being completely honest about, chances to win the Pac-12, chances to make the CFP. If you're 12-1 Pac-12 champion, you've got a good chance to make the CFP because you've got some good wins on your resume for these 2 teams in particular because of the schedule they have to play. So nothing is lost for these teams. That is what I would say to the fans of these 2 squads who are probably feeling down about the seasons that they've had because it hasn't been as good or as perfect as maybe they would have wanted it to be. Nothing's lost yet is kind of what I would say to them. This week, something will become lost for one of these teams. That's how you know it's such a big game. So I'm excited about it. The model was all over Utah in both of last year's matchups. People were telling me I was crazy, took a lot of heat for it. I'm just sitting here like, guys, the numbers are the numbers. Don't hate me. I don't know what else to tell you. Utah wins both those games. It likes USC this time around, though. I have USC minus 7.5 in this one. It's a 71% win expectancy. That said, it's not all roses for USC following their first loss of the season last week against Notre Dame. I said nothing is lost yet, but it could be if we don't get some improvement here. The Trojans, K Ford rating 16.2. That's number 14 nationally. Both of those marks, rating and corresponding ranking, season lows for the Trojans. Additionally, this offense had been number 1 in the country since week 2. They're now down to a season low number 4. So the sky is not falling. You still have the number 4 offense, but that's the worst that the Trojans have been all year. So again, relative to this team, trending in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, the defense continues to be a problem. It's ranking number 62 nationally. I say it every week. I won't belabor the point. It's a problem. Like USC, Utah's power rating is at a season low. It's 10.8. The Utes, as they always do, have a strong defense. It ranks number 8 nationally, but without Cam Rising, as we've talked about, this offense has not nearly been what I projected. It's fallen now to number 63. You mentioned it, Brett, kind of the diabolical nature of the 2 matchups in this game, offense, defense, defense, offense. The USC offense and the Utah defense, as you said, it should be an outstanding matchup. Both teams rank in the top 10 for me in terms of efficiency and the power rating of these units. The other matchup, though, again, as you talked about, it's just not nearly as juicy. I mean, my numbers give USC the very slight edge on both sides here. USC has fallen behind Washington and Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game projections. Even though Oregon has a conference loss, I'm still projecting Oregon with a better chance to make the Pac-12 championship than USC right now. I mean, that's pretty telling at this point. The Trojans are still undefeated in conference play, though. Notre Dame is not a conference game. Again, nothing is lost yet. With a win in this one, their chances, USC's that is, to make it to Las Vegas are back up to 50%. On the other hand, Utah does have that conference loss. They still have to play Oregon and Washington after this game against USC. So if the Utes want any shot of making it to Las Vegas, this is a must-win game. USC, if they want to make the playoff, it's a must-win game. But if they want to make it to Las Vegas, the USC could drop this one. And if they take care of business down the road, I still feel good about their chances, but it just eliminates their margin of error. Utah, their margin of error is gone already because you lost to Oregon State. Another really good team, by the way, but must-win game. There's so much on the line. I'm excited. Bottom line, USC minus 7.5, 29% chance that Utah makes it 4 in a row in this series, Brett, against the Trojans. You can't tell me that Utah fans, for as disappointed as they may be about, hey, no Cam Rising and the year's not going the way we wanted to, you can't tell me for a second how happy it wouldn't make Utah fans to say, all right, 4 in a row against the Trojans, out the door. See ya. You guys are going to the Big 10. We're going to the Big 12. Talk to you later. 4 in a row, guys. And who knows when the next time they're going to play is. Utah fans will love to lord that over USC fans' heads for as long as it takes until these two teams get together again in a non-conference game.
Yeah, just to kind of, I guess, talk about process for a moment. And I try to take people through processes when I break down these games, when I handicap them. Sometimes if I get too far in the weeds with stats and metrics and players and matchups, I get stuck. And that's what happened with this game. I'm like, well, I'm at a point where I'm just like, I don't know. So sometimes I dial it back, and I like to play the underthink game. And I know that that's something that will make some real diehard, sports bettors and people at analytics people like their skin crawl. But if I have to underthink it, I probably trust USC's offense to score more than Utah's, even against USC's defense. I'm not sure it's enough to lay the points per se at this point. Certainly not on the other side of 7. It might be gross, and I got burned once for zagging with that Penn State Iowa total. I'm never going to live that down. I'm not going to let myself live it down. But, Kelly, I think I lean under the total here. It's probably dumb, but what Utah is probably going to try to do, what I expect them, what I would do if I were in their shoes, shorten the game, play ball control. Kyle Whittingham is a good coach, and he knows what happens if you give Caleb Williams more opportunities. Bad news. No matter how good your defense is, they're filled with NFL talent, and Caleb Williams is going to make things happen. They're going to find the end zone. I know what he did last week, but it's what's going to happen. Like you said, law of averages. You keep giving him the football, he's going to find opportunities to score. So if I'm Utah, I'm running the ball, trying to shorten the game, ball control, under. That's how I got to that conclusion there. All right, let's wrap this up with a time-tested tradition on this show, our FCS game. We have number 4 Furman on the road at number 6 Western Carolina. This game kicks off at 2:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Plus, where most FCS action can be found. This game is played at E.J. Whitmire Stadium with a capacity just under 14,000. This is why the FCS is so great, though, in my opinion. There's so many top 10 matchups this year. Every week that I handpick these FCS matchups to talk about, I can almost guarantee I'm going to find a top 10 matchup. This week is absolutely no different. Furman historically has dominated this matchup, 35 wins, 13 losses, 2 ties. They did win 47-40 last year, fending off a fervent Western Carolina comeback in the fourth quarter. They scored 20, but ultimately fell short. My aggregated numbers, which I don't think are as fortified as the FBS ones, like you say, it's the K Ford ratings light. These are my aggregate light power ratings. They favor Western Carolina at home by 1.5 points. I do think the Catamounts, though, have a better offense than Furman does a defense. So far in the year, the Paladins have done just enough to win games. And Western Carolina, to be honest, they're an avalanche of points almost weekly. What does your light model say about this game?
The light model has this as a pick'em, Brett. It leans ever so slightly over 50% win expectancy for my number 14 power-rated Furman, going on the road to my number 21 power-rated Western Carolina.
But, Kelly, I ask you, did you take into account the absolute dominating home field advantage of E.J. Whitmire Stadium and its almost 14,000 fans?
No, I did not, Brett. A standard home field advantage applied. I'm hopeful that, in all seriousness, I'm hopeful that in the 2024 season I can have a dynamic home field advantage applied to the FBS model. I certainly won't have it in FCS in 2024, but I'm hoping if I can get it implemented in FBS in 24, that they could lay the groundwork for potentially having it in the FCS at some point. So, no, I haven't. So, if my numbers are saying it's a pick'em with a standard home field advantage, and you're saying home field advantage means more at Western Carolina, then there you go. It would shift my number to Western Carolina.
To be honest, Kelly, I have no clue. No disrespect to Western Carolina there. Anyway, hop on over to our Discord server where you can connect with over 4,000 sports betting fans and get live updates on our college football channel. There you can join a sharp and tilting and active community over there. Don't forget to subscribe to Line's YouTube for weekly college football odds and betting videos all season long, just like this one. And subscribe to us on your podcasting app of choice, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever you're using these days. And drop us a good review or a comment in the YouTube comments below if you like the show. Let us know your leans. Let us know if you agreed, disagreed. Let us know what's wrong with Kelly's model, because that seems to be the popular commenting choice here recently. Kelly, though, before we get out of here, please let everybody listening know where they can find your work.
You can find me on Twitter, on X, at KFordRatings. You can find me on the website, KFordRatings.com. Brett, I'll be completely honest. I have read a grand total of 0 of the comments this year, but I'm going to start diving in because it sounds like I'm catching strays from folks. Listen, you guys got a problem. All good. Share them in the comments. I'll start reading those things. And if there's things that I feel like I should respond to or need to respond to or need to address, if you've got legitimate questions, I'm happy to do so. If it's just hate punches, then by all means, keep taking them at me. I'm sitting right here in my basement in Indianapolis, Indiana. I don't know what to tell you, but you can find me on Twitter at KFordRatings, the website, KFordRatings.com, doing the articles at thelines.com. Hey, I just appreciate you guys watching. You hate it? It's okay. As long as you're watching, you're paying attention, you're seeing what we have to say, I appreciate that. And if you disagree with the model, everyone's entitled to their opinion. I'd love to see, if you guys have any models that you have out there, I'd love to take a look at those too, and maybe we can learn from each other. So how about that?
Well, thank you so much, as always, for watching. I'm Brett Gibbons. That's Kelley Ford. We'll see you all next time.